Hey, first period, I really appreciate your patience with me this morning. I've had some major laptop issues. It keeps shutting down on me on a different computer right now, but I'm going to try to go over to the school here during third period in order to get a loaner laptop so that hopefully this can be fixed up. So my computer just shut down maybe 5 times between 7:40 and 8:30. So what a morning, huh? So thank you for your patience this morning, trying to sign on. A couple people sent me emails and for checking your email. For those of you that signed in, were able to get into the Zoom session for the few minutes that I was able to connect in there and got your attendance. You're great. You're all good. Everybody else, you're also all good. Don't worry about attendance for today. I'll put in a note with the office. Everything's just fine. So no worries at all about attendance for today, given the situation. So all I'd like for you to do today is to kind of watch this video and then to read something on Canvas as well. So let's go ahead and get started with what we were going to do today. First of all, a reminder about your asynchronous assignment for the week, and that is to read YALPA chapter 16 and to read portions of YALPA chapter 18. The portions, it's Roman numerals 2, 3, and 4, and those are the Roman numerals that are at the top of each section as you scroll through reading YALP, and then to take the quiz. And then one final point about quizzes, the last set of quizzes weren't all that great. While the scores were good, a lot of the answers were really kind of like lazy. They showed that you were just kind of going through the reading and like, oh, I remember that from class and and that you maybe weren't taking notes and that you weren't using the reading to answer that. And I was generous this time, not going to be generous in the future. Okay, so make sure that you're answering the questions to your best ability. And so some of you did just fine, but there were a lot of quizzes that were not up to the expectation level that Nova and a college would certainly expect. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with today and what we were going to do. We were going to start out today with taking some notes on the Gilded Age and what this term means. And that's what this time period from 1877 after Reconstruction up to 1900, what it's called. And this transition to industrial economy, it's kind of a short set of notes today because we're going to spend a lot of time, well, in discussion groups. So what does this term gilded mean? Notice this is gilded with no U. So we're not talking about a gilded with a U-I-L-D like you would when you were talking about the Middle Ages and groups of trade workers forming together. This is the word gilded, no U, that means that something's been gold plated, that it has a shiny, bright exterior. But underneath, because it's merely gold plated, underneath you scratch the surface, like in this little picture right there, it's kind of not all that great. And that's a theme of this time period, that there are some wonderful innovations and advances in wealth. And some people are really living large. We've got Transcontinental Railroad, we've got people like Carnegie and Rockefeller, and all these great achievements that look great on the outside. But perhaps if we scratch beneath the surface, we might see that maybe it's not all that. Maybe it's built on the backbone, as this cartoon illustrates, it's built on the backbone of workers. That if we say, okay, there's the Transcontinental Railroad, but at what price? So we go, oh, wow, there's been all this mining that's occurred, but let's scratch that back and look at the devastating conditions and who's really only making the money and the impact on the environment as well. So kind of be thinking about that as we're going through, as you're reading through chapter 16 and 18 and reflecting back on chapter 17. What is it that looks gilded to you? That maybe there is this exterior shiny veneer outside, but maybe if we dig a little bit deeper, we might look, and say, well, why is that possible? And that's because during this time period, we're seeing increasing separation between the rich and the poor, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And some people have looked at it, as the question says over there, that like as you proceed through this unit, are we living in a second Gilded Age today? And there's a lot of conversations about that, especially right now in the pandemic, how people are having, there's two very different pandemic experiences. That some people are just like, at home chilling, baking bread because their jobs have continued because they can, right? And that they're not in any sort of economic dire straits. Where others have lost their jobs, don't know how they're going to feed their family, are trying to figure out how they're going to keep their housing, and that we have ththese very different worlds. So the pandemic has kind of reinvigorated some of these conversations. Like, are we in the middle of another Gilded Age? Is that what's happening now? It may be something for you to reflect upon as you're continuing to read through this unit. So let's look at just how wealthy they were. I was going to give you a few minutes today to kind of explore some of the opulence and the gild on the outside. So, for as an example, many of the wealthiest Americans used to summer, as one does, in Newport, Rhode Island, along the coastline, just beautiful. And many of these homes today have been turned into museums. And because of the pandemic, they're closed and they have virtual tours. So here we go. We're going to look at one that's free. Some of these you got to pay for, but this is a beautiful one that's free to anybody to look at. So this is a summer home of Edward Burnwind. He is a coal industry magnate from Philadelphia, so he goes all the way to Newport. And I would have hoped that you would go through and tour these homes. Now, I have a PDF of these slides linked onto Canvas. So the links would be live for you to touch on if you want to go back and find them, as I'm going to do right here. So just to kind of show you what you would see here if it loads. So you kind of click in here and it loads and you kind of see the house and super cool, right? Like, whoa. And you can just kind of go up the steps, right? And click on some things here and be like, wow, look at that art. So some things it would tell you about things. Yes, doesn't everybody have a painting oil on canvas from 1700 sitting in their foyer with match pair of marble busts? And you can kind of go through and walk through this home and see, what in the world is all here? My gosh, the opulence, right? This is their summer home, for goodness sakes. And also, if you were interested in taking a look at the servant life, like what it was like downstairs, you could do that as well. So here's what this looks like. Again, these links you can get from the PDF that's posted on Canvas, and kind of get a tour around. It's the bell system ringing, seeing what's here, going down the halls. Well, you get the idea, right? It's pretty amazing, all the kind of looking through the technology that we have. So I hope that you do spend a little bit of time exploring that. I was planning on giving you about 7-10 minutes to do that today because, well, I think it's kind of fun. And look at the wealth and the two different sides, right? The servants versus the family. Let's get this going here. Let's close that and go there. So these people, these wealthy people who had these lovely homes where they would summer, these industrial leaders, these are 4 that are mentioned in the reading that I'll expect you to know, and their related industries. So what sort of fields, steel, oil, finance, railroads they're associated with. But this bigger question of whether or not these men were considered captains of industry or robber barons, is this kind of ongoing discussion that historians and people have when they look back at this time period. Do you view these men as more captains of industry, like a leader, a captain of a team, like Captain America almost, sort of heroic term, going forward and pressing onward and doing great things? Or is it more of a robber baron, someone who's stealing, right? And not really earning things because he's a baron. He has this inherited title of nobility, like an earl or a duke, a baron. So he's just kind of, capitalizing off of the pre-existing wealth of others, a baron. Ooh. Your first paper topic is going to ask that you explore this idea, looking at Rockefeller. So you're going to be given a reading that one side sees him in a more positive captain of industry light, and the other side more of a robber baron negative light, and asked to come up with your opinion. What do you think, using the articles and things like that, and other resources if you'd like as well. So maybe just kind of put that in your head a little bit. You can start thinking about that. Again, Rockefeller will be the person that you'll be asked to look at. So what are the general sort of economic and societal reasons why we're able to transform to this industrial economy? Because even though we had industrialization before the Civil War and during the Civil War, it's really going to grow right now. It's going to take off. This is often referred to as the second industrial revolution. The first one associated with the market revolution in the antebellum pre-Civil War, and now the second one. And why is that? Well, because we have a lot of laissez-faire capitalism, economic and political policy. That laissez-faire, meaning government hands off the economy, non-intervention. We're not going to make laws about building or about business mergers. We're going to let you grow as big as you want. We're going to let you do however you want to do. We're not going to tax you. We're just going to let you go and do your thing to make money based on the natural forces of supply and demand. Let that be. If you want to make a monopoly, cool, that's fine with us, but you do your thing. And state and federal governments also gave businesses special breaks, special considerations. Like we looked at one already with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, how railroads were given land grants, free land as payment for building the railroad, so then they could sell at huge profits and then end up dominating the towns and the industries that developed along the railroads. And there's also an increasing labor supply. New immigrants arriving from abroad, mostly from Europe, from Southern and Eastern Europe, as your reading will attest, and also interior migration as well. People moving from rural areas to the cities where they could potentially make more money and just have more fun. Living out on a farm is hard and boring, guys. And cities offered, especially for young people, entertainment, more people, fun, and that was a pull factor for rural Americans who then moved to cities where they found more economic opportunity. And finally, we've got the natural resources, the mineral wealth that's been discovered, like the in the mining industry that we already talked about, and coal, as the other person mentioned, iron ore deposits as well that Carnegie will take advantage of, and navigable rivers in order to help transport them. So all these things kind of all together coalesce in this idea about why we're able to transform to an industrial economy. So, what about the actual workers? What were their conditions like? Bad, to put it mildly. Child labor had already existed, but it's going to grow during this time period and be much more widespread. Workers in general are going to have very long hours with low pay, no job security, and no benefits. So, if they were injured on the job, tough, out of luck. No health insurance, no sick days. If you were sick, you were expected to be work or you'd be fired. So, no sort of benefits like that. No job security as well. You could be fired at any given moment, or the business might just close up. So if a factory had met its production quota for the month, say on the 19th of that month, and worked everybody really hard to make its quota, you might show up on the 20th and the doors might be locked and you'd be out of a job. And then come the first, the start of the month, when they had due production quotas, they would just hire new workers. Maybe you might get your old job back, but maybe not. They didn't really care because there were so many workers coming in and the jobs were so de-skilled that they knew it wasn't going to take a whole lot to train some, to do the job again. So there's no sorts of job security. You just a sort of untenable existence. Company towns existed as well. We're going to take a look at what that means in the next two slides, but also dangerous working conditions. And a lot of that stemmed from being just tired on the job. And when people are tired, they make mistakes. They are more apt to fall into a burning vat, get hit by a touch at a furnace, make a mistake, get their hand caught in machinery. People made mistakes, and there weren't a lot of safety like precautions for people, no goggles or glasses or what the special protective gear or anything like that. So, what are these company towns that were mentioned? Well, this is an example of one called Pullman. Now, Pullman is also mentioned in your reading. Pullman was a company that made train cars, so railroad cars, the train cars that you would sit on when you go on the train for people to ride and go on their trips. So take a moment just to read this description about what it was like to live in a company town by Pullman. Oh my goodness, this company town, it almost sounds like serfdom in a way, doesn't it? It's not slavery or serfdom because you can leave, right? And like you can just say no, I don't want to work here. So you can go, but you're so tied to everything. They pay you in almost like fake money, like Pullman dollars, and they're only good at the Pullman store, and to pay your rent because you aren't allowed to own land. Only Pullman owns land, and Pullman teaches your children, and it's this sort of like almost like a total control sort of ownershipy sort of scenario. Here's somebody else complaining about what it was like to live in Pullman. So some workers start to look at this situation and what they're dealing with, and they start to get mad about it. So workers begin to organize, and the one way that they organize and to rise up against some of these conditions is that they formed labor unions. There's three labor unions that you should know, mentioned in the reading. The American Federation of Labor, led by Samuel Gompers, the American Railway Union, led by Eugene V. Debs, and also the Knights of Labor, led by Terence Powderly. All these unions, they had different like groups, and you should be able to know like their similarities and differences. Their common goal was to organize workers together, like pull them together, so that then they could send a representative who would represent the voices and the ideas of all the labor unions to go to the factory owners or the factory managers and say, hey, we want better wages. Hey, we want we want less working hours. We want protections, whatever it might be. And and the idea is that because they had banded together as a union, a organization, unionized as one group, that then they would withhold their labor and say, no, then we're all not going to work for together. Then fine, then we're not going to do this. We demand this collective. So management obviously didn't like this forming of unions. They were just like, oh my God, you're kidding me. We hate this idea of unions. So how did management respond? Well, as soon as they got wind of people forming unions, they often cut wages. They were just like, fine, you want to join a union? We'll cut your wages if we hear of anybody that's going to join a union. And people are, oh, I'm not joining a union. They would just fire employees too. You're out of here. They would blacklist employees, that is, spread unofficial word through the back channel to other companies saying, don't hire them. They're forming unions. This is a bad person. You don't want them. They're troublemakers. They would hire non-union workers as well to replace them. People that union leaders often refer to as scabs. Scab, like think about what a scab is, kind of temporary skin that's not nice and like regular skin, but it's kind of gross, right? And it can be plucked away, and it's not the real thing. And that's how they saw non-union workers. They said, these temporary workers, they were just replacements who weren't as good as us, and they were no good and rotten. They would just kind of take our jobs. And they would also, sometimes management would force workers to sign yellow dog contracts, a contract in which a worker said, I promise I will never ever join a labor union. So management takes all these actions to try to stop workers from unionizing, from organizing. Well, all these conditions and terrible pay and these actions of trying to suppress unions ultimately culminate into a lot of labor unrest where there were strikes that happened and riots. All these are mentioned in your reading. You can take a look at them a little bit more detail in class next week, like the Great Railway Strike, Haymarket Riot, Homestead, and the Pullman Strike that all happened in this time period, a time of great labor unrest. Um, so Now, the last part of class that you were going to do today that obviously we can't do because I was going to have you divide into groups, but it's something that I need you to do on Canvas, and that is reading a handout that's called Industrial Ideologies, but you only need to read page 1 and 2 of the handout. It's a article written by John D. Rockefeller, who again your paper topic is going to be about, in which he says what he thinks it means to be successful in life and in business. I was going to have you discuss some of his ideas, see how relevant or good or bad you think they are, and what you found frustrating, love it, hate it, etc., and talk with your group mates and do all these sorts of things with this. But that's not to be today, is it? So your task today is to, well, have watched this video and then to go read just page 1 and 2 of that handout that's posted on Canvas, and then not forgetting about your asynchronous assignment. And I'm really sorry today turned out the way that it did. Oh gosh, am I sorry it turned out the way it did. I'm hopeful that I can get everything fixed and can be back online for fifth period at 12 o'clock. Wish me luck, everybody, and I hope you have a great day and a great weekend if I don't see you. Okay? Bye.